I'd like to have a little bit of a look with you now at how World War II plays out, the Second World War. And what you're looking at right now, as I'm speaking, is footage of the Nazi invasion of Poland. It's actually recolorized footage, which makes it interesting. I think it brings it to life. A lot of the footage you normally see of the war is quite black and white and grainy, and this recolorized footage is showing some interesting things. You saw Hitler in colour and the colour of the uniforms. You're currently looking at the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, which was banned under the Treaty of Versailles. You're looking at the tanks that were banned under the Treaty of Versailles. You're looking at a resized German army advancing into Poland. And very soon you'll even see footage of the boom gates going up at a Polish checkpoint. The Germans argued that this war had been provoked by Poland, but no one really has ever believed such a story. This is part of, and what you're actually seeing here is part of the German push for Lebensraum, this racial war that moves into Eastern Europe. But right from the outset, we need to understand there was resistance to the Nazis. And I'm going to let this play as a couple of points come up. It's obviously a little bit tricky here. The first thing I wanted to say to you was that resistance took many forms. As we look at it, hopefully this will work without pausing our video again of the fighting, that there was physical resistance to the Nazis. People picked up weapons. They fought back. The Polish army was destroyed. They spent much of the time, the rest of the war, in camps. They were hopelessly outclassed by the German tanks. There was spiritual resistance. There were those people who just refused to give up their dignity. They held out against the Nazis' determination to either dehumanize them or to dehumanize, to persecute others. So as we think about the war, we need to remember that the Nazis are opposed. They're opposed by all sorts of people in all sorts of situations, and let's explore that. There was some resistance to the Nazis before the war. There were those who stood up, the upstanders, who challenged the Nazis within Germany. There were those who spoke out against them across the world. There were early voices arguing that the Nazis were threatening the world and that the Western powers, France and Britain in particular, should not try to appease them. But the voices of opposition to the Nazis in the pre-war years were largely quashed, silenced by the Nazis, who used concentration camps within Germany to imprison their opponents. The opposition to the Nazis also came in the form of nations during the war after 1939. There were groups of individuals who joined together to fight against the Nazis. Often these became known, as we'll say in a moment, resistance groups. Partisans, often communists in parts of the world, would join together to form small guerrilla band fighters who worked, sometimes referred to as the underground, against the Nazis. And there were individuals. And so the allies of the war, as we're seeing this last little footage I'll show you through at the moment, the allies of the war become, particularly the democratic nations, Britain and France, later joined by Russia, the Soviet Union, and the United States. With each of those nations came their own allies, and Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa fight alongside Britain against the Nazis and their allies during the war. The Soviet Union, Russia, and the United States don't join this effort to fight against Nazism until after 1941. The resistance, the underground, those groups within Germany who took up weapons, who worked as almost spy forces to take on the Nazi armies, to take on the regime. Those plotters within the German army, though they were small in number, who challenged Hitler, challenged the SS, took them on, blew up installations, attacked German troops behind their lines. The very famous French resistance, the Greek and Italian partisans, become very important. And then we have the upstanders, the people who refuse to be perpetrators of violence against the Jews, the people who refuse to be bystanders and just watch what's happening, the upstanders, those people who stood up rescued Jews, hid them in their homes, smuggled them out of the country. People like the very famous Oskar Schindler, Sugihara, the Japanese diplomat, Kurt Waldheim, an Austrian diplomat, who all do their bit to stand up. And these become known by the Jews today as the righteous among the nations. Let's now push on then to some images I think are fairly interesting for you as you see these final images of the invasion of Poland. The war saw bullying on all scales at all times of the Jews. What you're seeing here is images from 1939 in Poland of the anti-Semitism of the German troops as they arrive. I can tell from their insignia, these are actually not SS, these are German soldiers, rounding up the Jews from the outset. This is the beginning of a new phase of the Holocaust. These laughing soldiers cutting off the beard of an Orthodox Jew in Poland. Right from the outset, the war in Poland is one of anti-Semitism, of annihilation of the Jewish people.